Hello, Wooten.
What's up, HJ?
Another beautiful day in paradise. So, well, let's get right into it. How much of the actual story do you know about the first Thanksgiving?
Wasn't there a massacre?
I mean, it's history. You cannot turn 5 pages in a history book without coming out of a 5 pages in a good history book without running into a massacre. But to be fair to the first Thanksgiving, and the follow-on events and consequences of all that, it's a lot more interesting and sad than the normal mythology about Thanksgiving. Because, what's the normal mythology about Thanksgiving? And, the Mayflower, Pilgrims, they all got together, kumbaya, Indians taught them how to farm corn, and then something happened, but that's where the story ends.
I just go off the Addams Family movie, their reenactment with Wednesday killing all the little Mormon white kids.
And crazy enough, that was the reason Plymouth and Thanksgiving is notable is because they were one of the first English colonies where that didn't happen. So, let's set the stage a little bit. I don't know like you are, but I remember learning this little grade school rhyme. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue with ships of three. He sailed the sea, right?
Yeah, I never memorized one of those. But yeah, and I know what you're talking about. I know plenty of people who know shit like that.
Yeah, so, I'm not going to talk about how, Columbus wasn't the first person to discover America. We know Leif Erikson ran into North America at what he called Vineland way before Columbus. We found actual archaeological evidence in, the 1960s, which does understand why Columbus' story lived as long as it did, because we did not have counter evidence until the 1960s. There's a freaking book somewhere that's like, oh, this dude found this new land. It's like, did he know? 1960s, we found some actual physical evidence like, oh, this might have been where they landed.
Yeah, I heard at some point, I don't know for sure. I didn't fucking research nothing. But I'd heard at some point, some Italian Americans were tired of fucking racism and shit, and they pushed for the Columbus story to kind of give themselves a hero that was Catholic.
Yeah, and that's also why St. Patrick's Day is a holiday, because a lot, part of the American experience with America being this multicultural society is every single group needs to figure out how they fit into the greater narrative. That's why we have St. Patrick's Day. That's why we have Columbus Day. Even though there's pushback against Columbus I'm going to use the term Italians graciously, but to them, that was a way of Italian Americans emphasizing how they fit into the American narrative.
They're important, and yeah.
The weirder thing is, we're gonna go off. We're already on a tangent, but Columbus, Italy did not exist at that point. Italy at this point was still city-states. Columbus, I think, was from Genoa. He's not even from Venice. He's from Venice's rival. And he was also hired by Spain.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah. And so
I
he,
always thought that was weird. He wasn't exploring for his own country. I didn't realize Italy was. I mean,
not a
it sounds
country.
it sounds like a feudal system.
So, you know how we think about, like,
I don't mean to get you too much off on not.
oh,
Like,
no, like, I think this is an important thing to realize, right? So, you know how, like, ancient Greece was, like, just, it wasn't a thing, it was just a bunch of city-states fighting against each other? In the 1400s, and for a long while, Italy was not a kingdom. Italy was just a bunch of city-states fighting each other. The 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 tragic play of Romeo and Juliet takes place in one of those Italian city-states where it's just, you know, hell fucking
that was Venice, right?
Machiavelli. The reason he wrote about, you know, the books he did is because he grew up in these city-states fighting each other for control. Anyway, that tangent, I am off topic. But, and that's not even something I was researching for this. But I love rants, anyway. And so, well, there's also so Leif Erikson was probably the first person to like have a record of running into North America. There is also I haven't read this book, and I don't know how credible it is, but there is a little bit of like hypothetical narrative of the like 1420, the Chinese discover America, right? Because there was a famous admiral about this time from China who went about, said around, look how great the Chinese Empire is. He sailed around a little bit, and there's a book talking about the possibility of the Chinese maybe being the first people to discover North America, right?
Yeah,
I haven't read the book.
So them shooting over to the West Coast?
Yeah. Right?
Interesting.
And
yeah, and isn't there already like records of the Vikings using some farmland over there on the East Coast?
And that's the thing. That wasn't discovered until the 1960s, though.
Yeah.
And so there's a reason Columbus is the dude who gets the credit for this, because
yeah, and as far as I know, he only like came by one of the islands off of the Florida Keys, right? Or not the Florida Keys, but and like never set foot on the
Caribbean.
fucking.
He was in the Caribbean.
Yeah, never set foot on
And
the fucking actual land or some shit.
Yeah. And Columbus thought he was in like what we would today recognize as like Oceania.
Mm.
That's where he thought he was, so his math was way off, right?
Oh well, yeah. Most of the stories I've heard about or done anything historical about that was honestly he wasn't that good. He was just brave.
There's a fine line between bravery and foolishness, and personally, I think Columbus was just foolish.
Yeah, that's kind of how I read it.
You know, and this is also not, and we could do a whole episode just about how on Columbus himself, but
Crazy.
I'm trying to yada my way through Columbus a little bit.
I gotcha. He found a route for the Europeans to fucking get to America.
He was the first person crazy enough to try.
Mm-hmm.
Is really the thing, because part of this goes into sailing technology. We think about like when you think about boats, like you can imagine what like Columbus boats looks like, or like a Golden Age piracy, or the Mayflower. It's like got this ship, it's got these huge masts. But you have to realize that boat was not invented until the 1400s. The reason that cross-country thing did not, the Vikings were able to, like, island hop a little bit, and they managed, like, they went to Greenland, and then they managed to hop to what we would recognize, like, Canada or Maine, right? But unless you did that little hopping, you could not just sail straight across.
Yeah,
The
because
technology
supplies.
just didn't exist.
Yeah, the amount of time and supplies you could hold.
Yeah, it was not it was not possible with their technology. And Columbus was just when the technology was invented. Columbus was the first person who A was crazy enough to try, and B got someone to back him to do it. You know?
Yeah, this was shortly after they invented the mast was able to rotate a little bit so they could zigzag, right?
Yeah, kind of. The before that,
Because I
they
mean,
had
otherwise, unless you had,
before
yeah,
that, the Mediterranean, the trader ships, they had what were called cogs, but the most ships are still galleys. And keep in mind, this is the High Middle Ages, and most ships are still just galleys. And when I mean galleys, think like Bronze Age Greek people rowing galleys. You know, you were either using cogs or galleys. Most people. One of the reasons the Vikings were so, the Scandinavian Vikings were so unique is because they were the only Europeans that were not using galleys or cogs. They had their own. Anyway, this is this is not what I'm prepared for. I'm just going off memory from other crap I've read. But so another interesting thing to note is that even before Columbus, though, it's very possible that English Isle fishermen had discovered North America, but they just didn't tell anyone because they were fishermen. And if you're a fisherman and you find out, hey, there's a lot of fish here, you don't want to tell anyone because then you're selling your golden goose. Right?
oh yeah.
And so, even before
You don't tell anybody about your secret spot. You don't tell anybody about your secret spot.
Right? You find a good fishing spot, you don't want other people to find your fish, right?
Yeah. It's like it's like a gold panner telling somebody where they're marking their claim.
Exactly. So it is very likely, not 100% confirmed as far as I know, right? I could be mistaken at this point, but English fishermen very likely were fishing along this coast before Columbus, right? But even after Columbus, 1492, Plymouth is 1620. So you've got 100+ years of European and North American contact, right? And there are attempts by Europeans to make colonies here. If you're in like Central South America, Spain and Portugal are going full on, they found Brazil, they wipe out the Mayans, they wipe out the Incas, they found New Spain. There's a whole issue where Portugal and Spain go to the Pope about who gets what, and the Pope draws an arbitrary line on a map that they barely know how big the globe is at that point. There's like, here's a line, and Portugal is everything on this side of the line, right? And that's why Brazil speaks Portuguese and not Spanish.
Yeah. Oh. I gotta hit you up with a weird story later after this. There was like some 1700
story time, sir.
I forget the year and stuff, but yeah, like, I don't know, 1700s, some Japanese guy going through Mexico. Went through Mexico with a party to eventually go to the other side and visit the Pope and talk to him about keeping the Chinese out or something. Yeah,
that is awesome.
I'll send you some shit.
That is
But yeah,
awesome.
there's a very cool story about the first Japanese guy to visit Northern America And obviously everybody just losing their shit. Like, what? Who the fuck are these guys? Like, just shit they had never seen before.
We're note to self: make this a future topic. Right?
Yeah, yeah. It was forgotten about for a long time because his mission was unsuccessful. So it essentially came down to dishonor. But he'd kept a lot of the shit that he had, gotten. And somebody like basically dug it up out of a fucking attic. It was like, oh shit.
And that is the best historical content you can ever get. Just some dude's diary, you know? Anyway, so anyway, to get back on track, the 1500s is pretty much in North America, at least, not counting Central America and South America, is you have Europeans going over relatively on a pretty regular basis, actually, and they are in contact with North American tribes, right? And there are three ways this goes. One is the everyone benefits, where the Europeans trade with the Native Americans, and Native Americans trade with the English, and everyone's just like, okay, give us guns and bronze tools, and we give you furs. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the good outcome. However, the bad outcomes are either the Europeans capture and enslave the Native Americans and then sell them as slaves to the Spanish, or the Native American Indians capture the Europeans and take them as prisoners.
Yeah.
Both happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a slight problem with some of the narrative nowadays where it's like, oh, the Indians were so peaceful and stuff, and we came over here fucking, like, not all tribes are people are people. And these were people who just showed up on their doorstep. I'm sure they got murked a lot.
Which is why
But in modern day America, that's just the stand your ground law. I mean, they were within their rights.
Yes, they were.
I'm from Florida, man. Hell yeah, shoot them with an arrow. They shouldn't have been on your lawn.
Exactly. and like, you know, like the Pocahontas, Pocahontas is a Disney movie. We all at least know about it. And Plymouth is famous for giving us the Thanksgiving holiday, right? Mm-hmm. And both are famous because both those incidences create a treaty which allows the Europeans to settle North America. Because before that, there had been attempts.
Mm-hmm.
There had been failed colonies. And these colonies had failed. In fact, you know, actually go to my notes for the first time, instead of off my head. Let's see, what's the name of this colony?
I think I do actually remember a bit of what you're probably about to go into.
The Lost Colony of Roanoke. 1583 to 90. North Carolina. We don't actually know why the colony failed. They have just kind of
Well, we don't. So this is what I was about to get into. I've heard something about this. Because we don't know, because nobody was left there.
Exactly.
There's just a bunch of shit. Like, they had started it, and it's the only reason the Mayflower had a chance, right? Because there was already stuff there for them.
The Mayflower did not land there. The Mayflower landed. Your point of the Mayflower already being stuff there is correct, but that's because they found a Indian village that was still there, but there were no longer any Indians there. So they just raided. They just They pulled
Right.
they pulled a video game RPG protagonist and just looted the place.
Yeah, Ghost Town.
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably got plagued out by one of the other European fucking settlers.
Yes. As far from my understanding, yeah, it literally got plagued out. And
European
so,
diseases, man. Biological warfare was their best weapon.
yeah. But actually, to go into biological diseases, there's my research for this cleared up why the diseases were so bad for them. Because, well, let's
Yeah, right? Because there's diseases everywhere. We got
Yeah.
that.
yeah, and so even with diseases with a high mortality rate, the mortality rate was higher for them because everybody got sick at the same time. Imagine chickenpox, right? Chickenpox is not a good disease to get, right? But when you get it, usually we get it as a kid, right? Which
Yeah.
means when you're sick, your parents take care of you. They give you food, they give you water, they, make sure you're warm so you don't freeze to death, right? But imagine if at the exact same time you got sick with that, your parents got sick with that. And the entire
Well-
community also got sick.
Well, yeah, that's the idea with
Nobody-
everything going on with the coronavirus right now. The entire thing was, yeah, you're probably going to get it eventually. This is pandemic rules because we don't want everyone to have it at the same time and have hospitals over capacity and everything else, right?
Yeah, and that is why it was so deadly to the North American Indians, and also to South American and Central American people. It wasn't necessarily that with proper care they would have died more often. They might have, but what we need to understand is a huge factor that gets underemphasized is like, oh, they weren't exposed to these since they died faster, but it's never really explained why. It's just like, oh, they just died more. The reason they died more is because they all got sick at the same time.
Yeah. So perfect system would be, yeah, these villages were as close as family, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, the perfect system would be, your brother gets sick, you take care of him. By the time he's better, now you're sick, and he can take care of you.
Exactly. But the reason these Indian tribes, the reason it was now granted, smallpox still has like a 1/3 to 2/3 death mortality rate even with proper care, right? I
Yeah.
forget off the top of my head, but it's still pretty bad.
It's crazy
But-
big, yeah.
Yeah, but without proper care, when everyone's sick at the same time, when nobody's healthy enough to collect firewood, to collect fresh water, to go hunting to collect food,
Even by the
people,
time you're,
they don't necessarily die of the disease. They die of everything else.
yeah, even by the time you're not sick anymore, you're too weak to even take care of yourself for normal needs.
Or you die of the other things before the disease kills you. And that brings us to the first person I want to talk about, actually. Now, as with a lot of things, there's a good chance I'm gonna mispronounce this.
Oh, right. So sorry. Side tangent. That's why TB was TB is just bad because you can't cure it anyway. But that's what was fucking up so many people is way back in the day, everybody living like on the same fucking cot in America. Like you, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, and your fucking little cousin all sleeping in the same bed all the fucking time. You'd all get sick at the same time with shit. So like families just dropping off all at once was a normal thing.
Yeah, that's what happened to That's basically what happened to Native Americans.
Okay.
Where if it's to go back to my chickenpox example, look where when the kids get it, the parents take care of the kids because the parents already have immunity.
Yeah.
But when the Native Americans were introduced to these new diseases, nobody had immunity, so everyone got sick at once, and so there was nobody, healthy enough to be even just a nurse, even if that little factor would have saved a lot of lives, but unfortunately, since that didn't happen, since
Yeah.
there was nobody with immunity, they got decimated. Which brings us to who I think to first person I want to talk about. I'm probably gonna mispronounce this, but Tisquantum. All right. Now, Tisquantum was a Indian from kind of the New England, the Massachusetts area, right? In 1614, he was captured by Europeans and sold off into slavery into the Caribbean, right? However, Tisquantum not only managed to survive, apparently Tisquantum had a talent for languages. He managed to make his way to England. And this I think is interesting, because if you were into writing alternate history, historical fan fiction at the time, he is in London at the same time as Pocahontas.
Oh, snap.
Right? Now, there is no historical documented evidence of those two ever meeting, but to try to give a little bit of context to all this, they're in London at the same time.
Yeah. London ain't
Yeah.
that big.
Yeah. Now, Pocahontas is from this isn't the subject of this, discussion. Pocahontas and the Jamestown colony is in Virginia, which is further south than, New England and the Northeast, right? Tisquantum is from the Northeast. Tisquantum ends up being because he apparently picks up English really well. He picks up well enough to make his way to England, and he basically becomes a sailor to these English vessels that are making their way to the Northeast, to communicate with Indian tribes. They do their trading. Both sides hopefully profit, and then they go back. And Tisquantum is like, hey, I'm from this place. I speak their language. I speak English. I'm talking to you now, aren't I?
What a flexible man.
Yes.
I mean, yeah. Where most people would give up and go, well, I'm just fucked. He went, well, I mean, this is just happening. How can I make the best of it?
Right? Tisquantum is a god, Tisquantum should, people are like, we're tearing down statues of Columbus. Put up statues to Tisquantum,
Yeah, man.
Indigenous people today.
You've taken me out of my home, everything I know, this and that, but, I could sit here and sulk. Or
I can learn a new language.
I could make some money.
I mean, to be fair, he wasn't looking for money. He was just looking for a ride back home.
Yeah, well, look, everybody's trying to keep their life moderately livable, and making yourself useful in a bad situation is one way to do that. Smart guy.
Yeah. Again, you gotta give Tisquantum credit. And to prove the ironic absurdity of the universe, being enslaved in 1614 probably saved his fucking life.
Okay.
Because shortly after that, he basically avoided an epidemic that wiped out his specific tribe.
I preferred the first thing you said. Avoided academics. Oh, good for him. School sucks. Sorry, I know this is for your class, but that's why I had to rib you.
Fair enough. I don't. That is funny. But yeah,
It's cool. Yeah, you should mention to everybody or your professor or whoever the fuck watches this. I didn't
Hey,
even graduate.
Trevor.
I didn't even graduate high school, so.
And sad thing is, you're still smarter than most. You are smarter than most Marines I know.
I didn't finish high school and join the Marines. That should show everyone how dumb I am.
Dude, I also joined the Marines. Neither of us are in the 10%, alright? So, anyway, to get back on track.
So this guy saved. Well, so this guy was saved by tragedy.
Yeah, because he managed to avoid a plague, basically, right? Because he was in the Caribbean or London while North America was hit by an epidemic.
So was he from the tribe that was just ghosted that you talked about earlier?
So
Sorry, I'll let you get to
yeah. So his tribe is called the. Again, I don't know if I'm saying this right. The Patuxet. Patuxet. The only time I ever see this tribe referenced is in direct reference to Tezcutum. Because they are decimated. Most of them seem to get integrated into the major player for Thanksgiving and King Philip's War, the again, another word I'm probably gonna mispronounce, the Wampanoag. This is the tribe. I'm sorry, not that the tribe. A tribe implies a single entity. This is more like, it's like speaking about the Mongols, you know?
community. A community.
Culture,
Yeah.
you know? Again, community implies like a kind of a single thing. Like the Mongols are like...
No. I mean, a community can be several individual groups interacting with each other.
I think culture.
Culture.
I need to emphasize it's wide. Because
An Indian nation. I don't know.
yeah, you know, again, yeah, you know, the Wampanoag they're not a single cohesive unit. There are multiple factions within it and even though they're kind of affiliated with each other because they have rivals, which is the reason Plymouth gets founded. Because so Tezcutum makes his way back to, you know, New England back in like 1619, right? The Mayflower Pilgrims make their way to North America in about 1620. Alright? To go back to my notes real quick. Okay, so a little background on the Plymouth, on the Pilgrims, right?
Puritans, right?
Not just Puritans. They're even more extreme than I thought. They're Puritan separatists.
Yeah, they were too Puritan for the Puritans.
Yeah, where the regular... So background of this, you have the... You know, we've all heard of King Henry VIII. I'm Henry VIII, I am. You know?
I fuck a girl, she gives me a girl, so I kill her head.
Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived.
The Pope said I can't get an annulment, so fuck Catholicism.
Right? And so, the Puritans, they were upset with the New England church because they all thought it was still too Catholic. The reformist Puritans were like, okay, we can reform the New England church so it's no longer Catholic. The separatists were like, the very fact that it's the New England church and therefore tied directly to the monarch of England turned it into this. It's not a church, it's an extension of the state, which goes into separation of church and state, which is ironic. Is like, well, the one thing I agree with with these pilgrims about is like they have a point. They did not want their religion to be used as a political tool.
Yeah, don't you hate it when somebody has a point, but for all the wrong reasons?
Yeah, right. It's
This shouldn't be a part of the state.
King, one of the people who saved the most lives of the Nazi. It's just a broken clock twice a day, you know?
We should be able to enact our religious law as we please.
Yeah. And so, the separatist pilgrims, they bounced around a little bit, and they eventually got sponsored. And this is a kind of important thing, because you have to realize, the colony we now recognize as Plymouth was, the backers did want to make a profit.
Yeah, everybody wants to make a profit, because, like, this is an expensive trip, right?
Yeah.
And the more people you're taking on who aren't necessarily sailors... Alright, I'm gonna take a leap here. But I think I'm on point. They made a trade deal.
So, you know how there were already merchants, like, doing random trades with the Native Americans?
Yeah, which I assume is harder than fucking Europeans that you might drop off.
And the idea...
And you say, yeah, we'll take you over here for free if you sell us shit at fucking 1/3 the cost forever.
Yeah. and granted, the Native Americans did want European goods. They hadn't developed metalwork, and so they loved bronze tools. And of course, they loved firearms. And to go into firearms a little bit, they legit thought these things were magic. Also diseases, because their religious spiritual practices, their spiritual leaders. I don't even know how to pronounce. This is another word I don't know how to say correctly, because it's the spelling is Pawwaw. Powwow, which I feel like saying that I don't say it correctly, so I'm there. The translation is pretty much shaman. It's right?
They're a naturalistic, spiritual, religious leader.
Yeah.
Okay.
And their religious practices, they believe their shamans could send diseases as curses against their enemies. And keep in mind, this is before germ theory is a thing, you know? And even today, people don't... We're in 2022. People still don't believe germ theory, you know?
Yeah.
And so, when, keep in mind, it's
over
100 years of Native Americans being wiped out by diseases and being encountered by European firearms. They link the two together, and they kind of start thinking they're one and the same.
Oh, that guns also shoot diseases?
Or that, at the very least, the Europeans can't just curse them with a plague.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. Like, you're only exposed to your own culture for so long, you think everyone probably does things the same way.
Yeah. And granted, like, we hear about the Europe, when you start tipping your toe into this stuff, you constantly hear about how the Europeans misunderstand people, and there is a lot of that going on, but the Native American tribes also misunderstood things because, which is why some of these misunderstandings happen, right?
Yeah, when you
Because
don't know anything about it,
both
you don't know.
sides have their cultural assumptions, which are
Yeah,
fundamentally wrong, right?
yeah, that's the best term for it. Cultural assumptions, man.
Yes,
Because when you don't know somebody else's shit, you just assume it's the same shit as yours. Because why? You don't have anything else to go on.
exactly. You know, and so
Yeah, yeah. I remember there's some really fucked up quote about I think it was King Henry who was talking about basically well yeah, we have to colonize America. The Indians are wasting the land. They're not even using it for industry.
I
Meanwhile, they're
don't
just
think it
having
was.
a good I don't know who said it. I'm
Oh,
probably
somebody
misquoting
said
who
something
said it.
like that, and that people kept saying that, and that was a critique
They're
on
they're
Native
misusing
Americans
they're
because
misusing it. Like no, they're letting the land just be the land and they're just living on top of it.
well, and so to
The definition of misuse in the especially London-esque culture of no, we got to make profit from it.
yeah, and the a lot of Indian tribes like this is a universal thing. Like you see evidence from the East Coast all the way to California and the West Coast, right, where they were they were not most of them were not what we would call like city states at this point, right? But they did practice they did practice active agriculture, except it would be kind of more passive, where it's like, okay, we plant a bunch of trees, we're gonna go walk around for a little bit because the seasons change. We walk around a little bit. Oh, we're
Yeah,
trees
yeah.
here. We're gonna pick all this produce, right?
Yeah,
It
I'm
was
familiar with what you're talking about. Yeah,
right.
like a lot of the corn stuff was all right. We'll eat this stuff, throw these down here. We're gonna leave for a bit. When we come back, there'll be corn.
Yeah, and granted, there were a lot of North America native tribes were as diverse, more diverse than European cultures. Because it's a bigger area, it's a bigger land area. There were more people. There were more differences between them. They had more practices. They were, this people over here did this, people over here did that.
Yeah, and they all got interconnected. Like, yeah, you're Billy, marry my Susie, and then we'll make sure we always meet up around this time, and I don't know, all sorts of crap like that. I'm sure.
Yeah, and so, well, you should never. There are no universal rules for Native Americans, North Americans, just as there are no universal rules for Europeans, or no universal rules for Asians or Africans, or
As much as people would like to think there are.
exact right. No universal rules. You can even the best generalizations you will be able to find a fault in that, right?
Yes.
So, which is why I'm trying to focus on, you've got these New England Indians, which is, and keep in mind, if you're only listening to a recording, I am air quoting New England Indians, because that is again a generalization.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so, we've got. So, the Pilgrims sail out and they reach North America in about November of 1620, right? They're on a ship, the Mayflower. There's only 102 of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah,
Enough
there's not a lot of them.
Yeah. Yeah, you think about it space-wise, it's like, it's not even a high school basketball gym.
Yeah. They sail about the coast. they look for a place to land, and they end up landing in a abandoned Indian village, which not even Wampa, from what I understand, it's a Tisquantum is a tribe it's a village that used to belong to Tisquantum people. The Pax, the Patuxet, Patuxet. Again, whoever's listening to this, I apologize. I am the whitest person I know.
Patuxet.
Yeah. Yeah. Where it was a village of his people that nobody's there anymore because they were all dead. Or it might have been a combination of that, or they arrived in November, and a lot of the people in this area were migratory, where in the warm months they live on the coast, do some farming, fishing, and then in the colder months they move inland to get away from the cold Atlantic Ocean wind currents, because the Atlantic Ocean's fucking cold.
Yeah.
And to emphasize how, we've been talking about Native Americans, that the Pilgrims, they have it very rough. Wherever they went, where they eventually settled, most of them still ended up having to, stay on the Mayflower because there just wasn't enough room in this abandoned village. And half of them died that first winter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, not surprised.
Yeah. So let's give credit where credit's due. That was some tough crap they had to go through.
From my understanding, they didn't bring a lot of people who knew how the fuck to survive anywhere, really. Like, they were city people, weren't they?
I don't know the specifics on that, but you do have a bunch of people who they're moving because they are super religiously motivated to move.
Yeah, and they're just leaving it in God's
person,
hands.
Right? Like, it's like, oh, I might not be.
That's what I'm saying, though. They didn't bring a bunch of farmers. They didn't, even if they had brought a bunch of farmers, they arrived in winter. That's fucking stupid.
Yeah, they landed in November.
If they'd have brought a bunch of farmers, I assume the farmers would tell them, this is stupid to land around winter. So that...
Well, the farmers would not have left because, keep in mind, by the time they landed, it's 1620, right? People have been going back and forth for a century. They know how long it takes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, if any farmers were about to get on the ship, like you just said, they wouldn't have left. And so at that point,
they're all dead.
They're not on the ship because, hey, that's dumb. Stupid farmers. Like, everybody else must have been completely ignorant of what you needed to do to survive in a non-urban environment.
Yeah, that's
I mean, they had
probably
to.
a factor.
Hunters would know. Yeah, you don't want to land somewhere in winter and then try to fucking build up. That just piqued my interest as far as, like, they obviously they left out of desperation, not necessity or want.
Yeah. And for the record, the Plymouth colony would not become, quote, self-sufficient until like 3 years later.
Well, you
And by
just said half.
self-sufficient, that's where like the community can just like, oh, we've figured out how to farm well enough so that we can feed our own people.
Yeah. You just said half the people died in a couple of months.
Mo, so half of them died. Half of that 102 people, while half of them died that first winter. Keep in mind, this is the whole colony is supposed to be kind of a. They have people with for-profit economic interests who are backing them. And so they keep sending supplies and replacement people. Who, in this case, they would also consider supplies. People are supplies at this point. You know? Keep the colony going.
I gotcha.
Right?
But, so then to clarify, so do you mean just half of those original 100 people died that winter?
Yeah.
Do you know about how long were these resupply trips actually about taking? Do you know that? Like, I'm assuming like what, 2 months?
I do not know that specific.
Okay.
Right?
But, all right. Well, I'm just thinking. So,
Yeah. No.
half those people died
that's
the
a good
winter.
question. Yeah.
They're down to like 50 people. That is a very small community.
I mean, 100 people is not a large colony, especially when you're in what is
it wasn't big to
essentially
begin with.
like we're both we're both U.S. citizens, but we forget how this is basically like landing a colony in Andromeda to these people. You know, they get resupplied every few months from the homeland.
Yeah.
But as far as they know, they're in an, they don't know what's over the next hill. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even know. I mean, these people are ignorant enough to not know, because at this point, I'm assuming nobody's gone even 100 miles west.
No European anyway.
Yes, exactly. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
They can go off the Native Americans they're trading with on stories, but that's it.
Yeah.
And then they're taking the word of somebody who's foreign. They probably don't trust anyway.
Oh, yeah. There's very little trust between the Native Americans and the Europeans, which is part of why this is a tragedy. But they do manage to, they land and enough of them survive, right? The colony does not immediately die.
Just barely.
Yeah.
If you're saying half of them died over the winter and there was 100.
Yeah, there's again, but the local Indians, the Wamapog, I'm gonna keep mispronouncing this, the Wampanoag.
Look, man,
I'm going to keep saying that wrong and in multiple ways.
Until somebody can give you the correct way to say it, you're not doing anything to be insulting. Just roll with it.
But so, they land in November, and for the next few months, they see each other. It's the pilgrims would be like, oh, there are natives over the hill, but everyone keeps their distance, right?
Yeah, Susie May was talking to fucking Billy Joe, and I think they have to know about God, right? Everybody knows about God.
Yeah, but they,
Well, if they don't, we'll tell them.
Yeah, but there's no direct contact though. There's simply a lot of spying, right?
Yeah, they're not attacking us. We're not gonna start an attack.
We're not gonna poke the bear because we're all starving / freezing to death, and we went from 100 people to 50 people, right? This changes in March but keep in mind
when it becomes warm enough to not feel like you're dying all the time.
Well, And I think that's part of it, but I also think it's a lot of it is simply the Wampanoag. They were debating. The local leaders were debating among themselves about what do we do, right?
Right? Because they're super weak. Like, we could just kill them now before they're a
But
problem.
also, it's like they haven't done anything yet, and also at this point,
And the
they
Wamapa
know
were
the
like, that's
power
liberal
of
speak.
weapons.
You get the fuck out of here. We need to kill these fucking interlopers. And
And this becomes a recurrent. This next point I want to emphasize because it becomes a recurring issue. They want European weapons.
trade. I mean, everybody wants cool stuff, man.
Yeah, but you have to realize, like, to them, the European weapons, it's like, look, we both play tabletop games. It's like, to them, a musket is literally like giving somebody a large stick and saying it's a wand of magic missile. That is how they view these things. These things are, as far as they're concerned, it's practically magic.
Yeah, I mean,
Guns shoot magic. They like the rivals to the
well, I mean, yeah,
rivals to the Wampog pretty much use the term Thunderstick for these things, which refers to the Thunderbird, which implies these things are basically magic rods that shoot thunderbolts at people. All right.
yeah, or if you believe in some sort of gods, like some sort of godly sent down divine instrument, yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. What's the old expression? Any scientific advancement.
Significantly advanced technology is basically magic.
Yeah, if you can't explain it to, yeah.
Yeah. And so muskets were basically rifles of magic rods to these people, all right? Magic missile rods to these people, okay?
So what I can understand that is from their perspective, small group, we can trade with them. And then if we have enough weapons, we become the controlling community, or at least unfuckable with as far as the other communities in our area. It gives us the higher leverage of negotiation in all things if we have these things.
And that's how Plymouth and that's why Plymouth was pretty much allowed to exist. Because
they must have been so... I mean, if these guys had wanted, they'd have been so easy to pick off.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Which is how the narrative around Thanksgiving eventually develops. Because, spoiler alert, the modern narrative is how, the Plymouth is the ungrateful child. Because they were allowed to exist, but the parent nurtured them, and then they turned against them.
Yeah, right. Like without.
Yeah.
Like we just.
But we are jumping ahead, and that's spoiler alert. That's spoiler territory. So.
We're about to hit an hour. Can we take a 10-15 minute break?
All right. Yeah. We are about to this is episode 1 of Thanksgiving and everything weird about Thanksgiving that nobody heard about. So I'm first.
Tragedy giving.
Yeah. So if you had pluggables, this would be talking about pluggables, except get ready for episode 2.
Just the one that goes in my butt. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
See ya.